key issue 1 and 2. Before agriculture, there was hunters and gatherers. Groups of 50 people or less would go to travel, find food daily. Men would hunt game, and women would gather fruits, berries, and plants like that. Today, less than 1% of people still do that now. In isolated areas such as Australia's Great Victorian Desert. Agriculture originated 8000 BC when plants and animals started to become domesticated. The end of the last ice age, climate change, and distribution of all species is one of the reasons agriculture started. Plus, humans wanted to become sedentary and experiment. Another thing, 97% of all farmers are located in lower developed countries. Plus, the start of agriculture caused a higher increase in population. Subsistence agriculture is located in lower developed countries, while commercial agriculture is located in more developed countries. There are 3 main differences between subsistence and commercial agriculture. Can you guess what that is? Exactly! It's the number of farmers, use of machinery, and farm size. In regards to number of farmers, lower developed countries, they have 44% of their population are subsistence farmers, and they tend to only make food for themselves to survive and don't make any profit off of it. And in commercial farming, more developed countries only have 2% of their population working in farms, and they do that for profit. In regards to farm size, there are larger farms in more developed countries for the use of machinery and things like that. In lower developed countries, they have smaller farms due to low income. Watching key issue 2. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Dietary energy consumption is the amount of food that an individual eats. In order to have a healthy and active life, you have to have food security, which is the access to things that'll meet your dietary needs.
This is key issue 3, part 1.
Pastoral nomadism is the dependency on animals rather than crops. This is practiced by nomads with a strong sense of territory, so they don't just wander randomly. They get their grain from trading animal products such as milk, skin, and with merchants. What they use mostly are 3 animals. Camels, because they don't need that much water and they can carry a lot of things. They use goats too, and sheep. They practice transhumance, which is going up in the mountains during summer and going down to the valleys during winter. They are slowly not being used that much because of modern sedentary agriculture such as commercial agriculture.
Go.
Pastoral nomadism. It's mostly located in Southeast Asia, North Africa, Central Asia, and most importantly, East Asia. Shifting cultivation is basically where farmers keep the land fallow for a certain amount of time and then go back to it once it's fertile. The way that they do this is slash and burn agriculture, which is clearing out all the land and taking out all the weeds and the stumps, and then they quickly start growing on that land because it's fertile, but they can only do that for 3 years at most, and then you have to wait 6 to 20 years for it to be fertile again, making it very inefficient. They use hand tools and animal power to prepare the swidden for crops like rice, yams, and corn. Farmlands were traditionally owned by villages, but now are privately owned by individuals. This is slowly becoming replaced by growing of cash crops, logging for wood being used for the public, and ranching. We can locate shifting cultivation in primarily tropical regions such as Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. So intensive substance agriculture with rice dominant is mostly done in small farms. They practice intercropping, which is putting your cash crops, in this case rice, and putting your survival crops on top, so they're in hills. They usually start with prepping the land for rice and cash crops, and what they do is that they plow it and then they flood it. And because rice has to have a lot of water, they plant it in other fields, and then they put it in the nursing.
They take it from the dry nursery into the wet field.
Intensive substance with rice dominant is primarily with large population concentrations of East Asia and South Asia. Intensive substance with rice not dominant is primarily in large concentrations too in South Asia and East Asia, but it's located where rice cannot grow. Landers work intensely, so they use crop rotation to avoid erosion of the crops. So plantation farming. Plantation farming is the sale of crops in developed countries, such as tobacco and cotton. This was seen a lot in North America, and it was owned by Europeans and Americans in the 1800s. Workers weren't paid because it was slavery, and they were used to harvest cotton and tobacco and sugarcane. Plantations weren't used that much in the US anymore after the Civil War, which was ignited because of slavery. Plantations are primarily in tropical and subtropical regions of Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia.
Welcome to Key Issue 3, Part 2. Mixed crops and livestock. The integration of crops and livestock together, where you feed your crops to your livestock to get back fertilizer to grow more crops. The workload throughout the year is distributed very evenly. In the US, the main type of crop there is sold to, is corn. Not very surprising. Most income comes from the sale of animal products such as leather or meat, and crop rotation is used, where different crops are rotated throughout the different fields throughout the year to avoid soil erosion. Mixed crop and livestock takes place in two places in the world: Midwest America and within Central Europe. Commercial gardening and fruits. It's a very large scale and more modern type of gardening, which uses technology and has access to long growing seasons, humid climates, and a very large eastern US market. Most of the crops are distributed to the market by truck farming, which means bartering in Arab. Most of the fields specialize in one or very few crops, and is usually in crops which are in very high demand within the market. Dairy farming. In dairy farming, it is most predictably the production of milk and milk-related products. Most milk farms are located very close to the market, and if they're located farther, they produce stuff like butter and cheese. Like New Zealand is the top of that because it's very isolated. Most developed countries are the ones producing milk because they have the largest markets, and again, they have to be close to those markets. Cows. Dairy agriculture takes place in northeastern USA, southeastern Canada, and northwestern Europe. Grain farming. Grain of any type is the most important crop on almost every farm, and the most important type of crop of grain is wheat. Good old wheat. The developing countries produce half of all grain, and the lead producer of that is China. Uses of large and heavy machinery is used in the farms so that work can be more efficient and production can be a lot more higher. There's only 2 seasons in which harvesting and growing happens, in the spring and in the winter. Work is not very uniform throughout the year, but it's work. Grain agriculture takes place in north central USA, southwestern Canada, and northwestern Europe. Livestock ranching, the type that you see in the movies most commonly, and what most people think of when they think of, well, farming. It gained a lot of popularity in the 1860s due to a huge demand of beef within the US, but then again lost all of that popularity in the 1880s because of sedentary farming also gaining a bigger boost. The two fought for a very long time. Sedentary farmers used a lot of barbed wire fences to keep out livestock ranchers from their area. Eventually the government sided with sedentary farmers and livestock ranching was kicked to semi-arid and arid climates where vegetation wasn't able to grow at all. Ranching takes place in western North America, southeastern Latin America, Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the South Pacific. Commercial ranching in other regions. Other regions outside the US that use this livestock ranching are Eastern Europe and Northern Latin America. Australia and Argentina are really big contenders for this because they have a lot of open space as well as proximity to seaports. Developing countries produce over 2/3 of all the world's meat, and China is the top of that. Commercial gardening takes place in southeastern US of A and southeastern Australia.
Mediterranean agriculture, done near live coves such as this one, with very moist winters and very dry and hot summers. Livestock can't be, well, produced here because there's not a lot for them to eat now, is there? Well, horticulture is used instead, which is the growing of fruits and vegetables, mostly for human consumption. Most of your wine comes from Mediterranean places like this, due to the fact that cash crops here are olives and grapes. But California is a very special exception because they focus on growing those juicy citrusy oranges and those good old tree nuts. Delicious.
Mediterranean agriculture is primarily around areas around the Mediterranean Sea, the western US of A, and the southern tip of Africa and the southern tip of Chile.
The problem with low developed countries is that they have to grow crops for themselves and the ever-growing population. This leads to new techniques, larger fields, and new tools being adapted. The one problem with low developed countries is that they have to grow crops for themselves and the ever-growing population. This leads to new tools, techniques, and farmlands being adapted. Also, land is either fallow for a short amount of time or isn't fallow at all. Food prices have doubled from 2006 to 2008. The United Nations attributes this raise in prices due to poor weather in the South Pacific and North America, higher demand in China and India, a smaller growth in productivity, and use of crops as biofuels instead of food in Latin America. Developed countries, they use money to purchase seeds, chemicals, and better technology to grow more food. Lower developed countries will sell out of season crops to more developed countries to purchase agricultural materials to feed export farmers. The problem with Africa's food supply is that the high and ever-growing population does not have enough food because Africa's government keeps the prices low, which discourages farmers from selling more or creating more crops. Some countries, instead of selling out-of-season crops, will sell drug crops. An example of a drug crop is cocaine. It is abused by around 17 million people worldwide, and it's derived from the cocoa leaf and is produced in Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru, and it's mainly consumed in North America. Heroin, another drug crop is heroin. Heroin is abused by around 17 million people worldwide. It is derived from raw opium gum, and 90% of it is produced in Afghanistan, while the rest is produced in Myanmar and Laos. Most of its users are in Europe.
Oi, Ole! What's a good dose today?
Marijuana is used by 140 million people worldwide. It's derived from the cannabis sativa plant, and most US users get their marijuana from Mexico. As food prices have doubled from 2006 to 2008 due to poor weather, higher demand for crops, smaller growth, and the use of crops as biofuels. The problem with farmers in more developed countries is that they don't get enough money in return for the crops that they sell. The US has made 3 different laws for this. The first law is that farmers are encouraged to produce crops that are in higher demand. The second law is that farmers are paid subsidies by the government. The third law is that excess crops that are made by farmers, the government will give them to low developed countries.
Key Issue 4, Part 2. There are 4 ways to increase the world's food supply. One way is by increasing exports with surplus. In response to increase in global demand for food, USA passed Public Law 480, the Agricultural Trade and Assistance Act of 1954, which made the sale of grain have low interest rates. The United States is still the leader in grain exports, but Latin and Southeast Asia are catching up. But Japan by far is leading in food importing. Also, some other leading exporters are Latin America, North America, Southeast Asia, and South Pacific. Oh, hi there. Did you know another way to increase the world's food supply? You can expand agricultural land. Historically, food supply has increased primarily by expanding the amount of land devoted to agriculture. For example, Industrial Revolution with lots and lots of land. Nowadays it would be harder because population has increased much more rapidly than agricultural land is available. For example, farmlands have been abandoned because of lack of water. This is called desertification, which is human actions causes places to have desert-like conditions. Also, urbanization is reducing agricultural land. For example, houses and roads are more preferred than farms. Third strategy to increase the world's food supply is expand fishing, which is the cultivation of seafood under controlled conditions. In other words, aquafarming. Strategy to increase the world's food supply is by increasing productivity. New agriculture practices have permitted farmers worldwide to achieve greater yields from the same amount of land. For example, Green Revolution. Green Revolution is the invention and rapid diffusion of more productive. Miracle wheat seeds responds better to fertilizers and matures faster. Some countries do not have money to make full use of miracle seeds. GMOs are the mixing genes of 2 or more species to make one organism. 10% of all farmland go to genetic modifiers. 77% are soybeans, 49% is cotton, 26% is maize. In the US, 94% are soybeans, 90% cotton, and 88% maize. The pros and cons of this is substantial agriculture is lower profit and lower cost to do better for the environment. Some of the pros to this are higher yields, increased nutrition, and more resistant to pests. Some cons of this are health problems, export problems, and increased dependence on the US.
Yeah, that's it for Chapter 10, Agriculture.